Welcome to the Day of Wellbeing. Today I want to talk about the rule of thirds, which is also the principle of sustainability, basically, and how it applies to health in particular. So I first came across this rule when I learned Tai Chi many years ago. And I think it was in the first lesson they introduced this rule called the 70% rule, which is another name for the rule of thirds. So 70%, two-thirds, roughly the same amount. And the idea is that when you're doing Tai Chi or any kind of Taoist body practice, that you only extend yourself to 70% of your maximum capacity. And this applies to like physical postures. So for example, you might have a posture, 100% would be my joints are locked, right? But 70% would be like plenty of comfortable margin. Okay, so it applies on a physical level. And in a way, the way that these Taoist arts work is that what we do physically is like a metaphor for what happens in our broader life. So we kind of learn the principle through a Tai Chi form. And then it kind of spills over into other aspects of our life. So as well as physical postures where it's really obvious, there's also things like how long you practice for, how hard you push yourself. And the basic idea is if you go past 70% or two-thirds roughly, you're getting into the territory of creating resistance. So another example would be if you're having a massage or if you're giving someone a massage and you're like 100% of your, how much they can take or how much you can give in terms of pressure, it's not going to be a relaxing massage. But of course, if it's like less than two-thirds, it's like, well, come on, you're not really doing anything. There's no, nothing's happening. So you've got to have this kind of combination of, what do they call it? Effortlessness. But it's not without any energy, but it feels effortless because you've got this kind of margin. And in terms of health more broadly, if you keep that margin, that reserve, then of course you'll be better prepared for the unexpected. So things can happen in life that we didn't anticipate that require our energy or our energy, even if it's in terms of healing. So we might get really ill with something like, I don't know, long COVID or, whatever else. And suddenly, it's completely like decimated our system. And if we haven't got that reserve, it's going to be really hard to come back from that. Whereas if we've got that reserve, then we may still get ill, although we're less likely to. But in dealing with healing through a kind of medical crisis or another kind of crisis, like you could go through some very stressful life experience, it could be work related, relationship related, bereavement, whatever, intense stuff happening in life, and you've been going along at 100% foot to the floor, there's no margin. There's no breathing space. And it's like I was already at 100%, and then life required me to, kind of up my game, and there was nothing more to give because I was going along at 100%. So you pull back in order to be sustainable. And if we apply this throughout our lives and all the different activities that we have, then there's a much better chance that we can ride the waves that come our way and maintain a good level of health throughout, and health on all levels, not just physical, but mental, emotional, spiritual, or the rest of it. So that's the first part of the rule of thirds, is this, two-thirds of your maximum capacity when you're fully healthy, right? So that's like fully healthy, no obvious problems. I'm going to give life two-thirds of my maximum, okay? And it's going to have this kind of sense of effortlessness, or not using force, because I've got that margin of error. And it's not something that our culture really encourages. So it's a little bit hard to do that. We tend to be educated to be like, give it your all, and to go past 100% into burnout and all the rest of it. But that's when you're healthy. Okay. Now things are different when you are compromised. So say you've got ME, CFS, long COVID, some other illness. You're going through a period of great stress. You started getting into burnout territory. Then the rule of thirds becomes 1/3. Okay, so in terms of what you could give, you only give 1/3 of what you could, of your maximum. So again, if you're really compromised and you can walk for 10 minutes before you fall over, then you only walk for 3.3 recurring minutes, whatever the maths is there. So you see what I'm saying here? So it's like you're radically within your maximum capacity. You're not just like, leaving a bit of a margin, but you're leaving mostly margin and only giving a little bit of actual activity. And this is absolutely crucial in terms of recovery from long COVID now, and ME and CFS and other related things, burnout in general, any kind of medical ongoing medical problem. Now, I'm not claiming that I know the answer to this. I can only speak for what's happened for me and what people have told me about how important this rule is in terms of medical practice that they've been involved in. So I've heard about it. Particularly my teacher treated 10,000 patients at least using Taoist arts, and this was like a core principle. So it's not just something that I've made up on the spot. It's a really core principle, and I think it could really benefit the ME CFS community in long COVID to understand this. Because we don't necessarily want to like do nothing. Okay, obviously, you know, in the early stages, there's a period where you really can do nothing sometimes with these illnesses, and your body's going to tell you that. It's like, okay, if you can just about get up and brush your teeth and go back to bed, you kind of know what your limit is. But as we start to get a little bit of wiggle room within our illness, a little bit of energy, even if it's just mental energy, right? So, I mean, I was so ill when I first got ill that mental energy, I couldn't text, I couldn't use the screen, I couldn't watch anything. It was just, you know, just too much going on just mentally. I was basically just flat out bedridden, and I couldn't even like do the meditations that I knew. But for example, there's a meditation where you count your breaths in and out in cycles of 10. It's a really well-known meditation. And of course, if you've got very, very little mental energy, it might be hard to imagine this if you haven't experienced it, but it's a real thing, like proper, serious mental fatigue, physical fatigue. Then counting 10 breaths, it's not going to happen, right? But, or even if you, okay, let me say it a different way. If you could just about manage to stay focused for 10 breaths, you would only count for 3, and then you just let your mind turn to mush, however long you need to, like for the rest of the day. Or it might be that a few minutes later you try again, count 3 breaths instead of 10. Right? So that's the rule of thirds. I know it's not exactly 3/10 is not a third for people who are concerned about that sort of thing. But that's the principle, right? So even in terms of your mental effort, when you're lying there and you're trying to do something for yourself, counting your breaths, being, you know, focusing on your breaths just for 3 cycles, that, because you're staying so radically within your limits, then your capacity can very, very gently and very sustainably increase. And you always need to be attuned to whether it has actually increased, or whether you need to stay at the level that you're at, or whether you actually need to dial it back to stay within this 1/3 of your capacity. But I think this is a real key to recovery with a lot of these illnesses is, you know, we don't want to push ourselves because, you know, we get pushed back, we get post-exertional malaise, we can make our situation much worse. You know, we need to accept really that our lives are like pruned back to some kind of unrecognizable, unimagined minimum of what it's possible to do. But within that, the seed of hope for me is this 1/3. So when I was really ill to begin with, I remember I'd get up and I would do 5 minutes if I could of the beginning form of Tai Chi. So it's just, it's not a Tai Chi lesson, this, but, you know, doing this movement, which is really, you know, Tai Chi is known to have all sorts of amazing health benefits, but if you did too much, it would actually be more harm than good. But if you stay within that tiny limit, and sometimes 5 minutes was too much, so I'd do like 1 or 2 minutes and I'd have to lie down and my heart would be pounding. But always having an eye to, you know, what would my maximum capacity be here? What is 1/3 of that? If I do 1/3 of that, I might just about be okay here. So that's the rule of thirds. Okay, so when you're fully healthy, then approach life with like, well, I'm going to give it 2/3 of my all, and keep that bit in reserve, because you might need it, and it just makes everything a lot smoother anyway. I often talk about, you know, those 15 puzzles where you get 15 tiles and an empty square and a grid. If you didn't have that empty square, you couldn't possibly solve the puzzle. And if you took another one of those squares out and had 2 spaces, it would be really easy. And 3 spaces, it would be even easier, right? So we need space in our lives. As we run out of space, the whole system crashes. This happens with computing as well. It's like once you reach close to 100% of CPU usage, everything kind of grinds because you haven't got that spare space. And that's a really good analogy, right? So you need those margins. So if you operate at 70%, those margins are a safety margin. They keep you, they keep everything kind of smooth, flowing, and sustainable. If you're healthy, and if you're compromised, you go down to 1/3, and you stay radically within what your maximum capacity would be. And you have to be very, very sensitive to what that is, how much that is on a given day, or, you know, a different period within a given day. It could be that in the morning you can go for a reasonable walk, but in the afternoon, you know, 1/3 would mean literally, I don't know, counting a few breaths and then going to sleep. You know, you've got to develop that kind of sensitivity to your body and your energy in order to nurture your health and heal yourself. So that's it. That's what I wanted to say. The rule of thirds comes from Taoism. It's basically the principle of sustainability, and it may well serve you, and I hope it does. Okay, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.